Good morning, kids. Today we're going to continue reading The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. I'm recording outside, so you may hear some outside sounds like birds, and hopefully nobody's mowing their grass while we're trying to read. We left off beginning on chapter 12, and where we last left Edward, he was in the garbage dump, and all of a sudden a dog dug him out. So, there we go. That is where we will begin our day. This is chapter 12. You can hear the airplane. But it's too nice not to sit outside, so. Edward did not have much time to savor the light, for the dog suddenly appeared above him, dark and shaggy, blocking his view. Edward was pulled out of the garbage can by his ears, dropped, and then picked up again, this time around the middle and shaken back and forth with a great deal of ferocity. The little dog growled deep in its throat and then dropped Edward again and looked him in the eye. Edward stared back. "Hey, get out of here, you dog!" It was Ernest, king of garbages, and therefore king of the world. The dog grabbed Edward by his pink dress and took off running. That's mine, all garbages is mine," Ernest shouted. "You come back here." But the little dog did not stop. The sun was shining, and Edward felt exhilarated. Who, having known him before, would have thought that he would be so happy now, crusted over with garbage, wearing a dress, held in the slobbery mouth of a dog, and being chased by a crazy man? But he was happy. The dog ran and ran until they reached the railroad track. They crossed over the tracks, and there, underneath the scraggly tree, in a circle of bushes, Edward was dropped in front of a large pair of feet. The dog began to bark. Edward looked up and saw that the feet were attached to an enormous man with a long, dark beard. "What's this, Lucy?" said the man. He bent and picked up Edward. He held him firm around the middle. "Lucy," the man said, "I know how much you enjoy rabbit pie." Lucy barked. Yes, I know. Rabbit pie is a true delight, one of the pleasures of our existence." Lucy let out a hopeful yip. "And what have we here? What have you so graciously delivered to me? Is definitely a rabbit, but the best chef in the world would be hard-pressed to make him into a pie." Lucy growled. "This rabbit is made of china, girl." The man held Edward closer to him. They looked at each other in the eye. "You're made of china, aren't you, Malone?" He gave Edward a playful shake. "You are some child's toy, am I right? And you have been separated somehow from the child who loves you." Edward felt again the sharp pain in his chest. He thought of Abilene. He saw the path leading up to the house on Egypt Street. He saw the dusk descending as Abilene ran toward him. Yes, Abilene had loved him. "So, Malone," said the man. He cleared his throat. "You are lost. That is my guess. Lucy and I are lost, too." At the sound of her name, Lucy let out another yip. "Perhaps," said the man, "you would like to be lost with us. I have found it much more agreeable to be lost in the company of others. My name is Bull. Lucy, as you may have surmised, is my dog. Would you care to join us?" Bull waited for a moment, staring at Edward, and then with his hand still firmly around Edward's waist, the man reached one enormous finger up and touched Edward's head from behind. He pushed it so that it looked as if Edward were nodding his head in agreement. "Look, Lucy, he's saying yes," said Bull. "Malone has agreed to travel with us. Isn't that swell?" Lucy danced around Bull's feet, wagging her tail and barking. And so it was that Edward took to the road with a hobo and his dog. Chapter 13. There you have a picture of Bull. And there's Edward, who is now, did you get the name? He's now called Malone. They traveled on foot. They traveled in empty rail cars. They were always on the move. "But in truth," said Bull, "we are going nowhere. That, my friend, is the irony of our constant movement." Edward rode in Bull's bedroll, slung over Bull's shoulder, with only his head and ears sticking out. Bull was always careful to position the rabbit so that he was not looking down or up, but was instead forever looking behind him at the road they had just traveled. At night they slept on the ground under the stars. Lucy, after her initial disappointment about Edward being unfit for eating, took a liking to him and slept curled up beside him. Sometimes she even rested her muzzle on his china stomach, and then the noises she made in her sleep, whimpering and growling and shuffling, resonated inside Edward's body. To his surprise, he began to feel a deep tenderness for the dog. During the night, while Bull and Lucy slept, Edward, with his ever-open eyes, stared up at the constellations. He said their names, and then he said the names of the people who loved him. He started with Abilene, and then went to Nellie and Lawrence, and from there to Bull and Lucy, and then he ended with Abilene. So it sounded like this: Abilene, Nellie, Lawrence, Bull, Lucy, Abilene. See, Edward told Pellegrina, I am not like the princess. I know all about love. There were times, too, when Bull and Lucy gathered around a campfire with other tramps. Bull was a good storyteller and an even better singer. Sing for us, Bull, the men shouted. Edward loved it when Bull sang. So here's Bull singing with Edward on his knee. He's still wearing his dress in the campfire. It's a really pretty picture. Bull sat with Lucy leaning against his leg, and Edward balanced on his right knee, and he sang from somewhere deep inside himself. Just as Edward could feel Lucy's whimpers and growls resonate through his body at night, he could also feel the deep, sad sound of Bull's songs move through him. Edward loved it when Bull sang. And he was grateful to Bull, too, for sensing that a dress was not the right kind of clothing for Edward. Malone, said Bull one night, it is not my desire to offend you or comment negatively on your choice of garb. But I am forced to tell you that you stick out like a sore thumb in that princess dress. And also, again, with no wish to offend you, that dress has seen better days. It was true. Nellie's beautiful dress had not fared well at the dump, or in its subsequent ramblings with Bull and Lucy. It was so torn and dirty and full of holes that it barely even looked like a dress anymore. I have a solution, said Bull, and I hope that it meets with your approval. He took his own knit stocking cap and cut a big hole in the top of it and 2 small holes on the side of it, and then he took off Edward's dress. Look away, Lucy, he said to the dog. Let's not embarrass Malone. Bull slid the hat over Edward's head and pulled it down and poked his arms through the smaller holes. There you go, he said to Edward. Now you just need some pants. The pants Bull made himself, cutting up several red handkerchiefs and sewing them together so that they formed a makeshift covering for Edward's long legs. Now you look like a proper outlaw, said Bull, standing back to admire his work. Now you look like a rabbit on the run. And here's Edward, a rabbit on the run, introducing us to our next chapter, chapter 14. At first the others thought that Edward was a great joke. A rabbit, the hobo said, laughing. Let's chop him up and put him in the stew pot. Or when Bull sat with Edward carefully balanced on his knee, one of them would call out, Got yourself a little dolly, Bull? Edward, of course, felt a surge of anger as being referred to as a dolly. But Bull never got angry. He simply sat with Edward on his knee and said nothing. And soon the men became accustomed to Edward, and word of his existence spread. So it was that when Bull and Lucy stepped up to a campfire in another town, another state, another place entirely, little bug came to visit, the men knew Edward and were glad to see him. Malone, they shouted in unison, and Edward felt a warm rush of pleasure at being recognized, at being known. Whatever it was that had begun in Nellie's kitchen, Edward's new and strange ability to sit very still and concentrate the whole of his being on the stories of another became invaluable around the hobo campfire. Look at Malone, a man named Jack said one evening. He's listening to every word. Well, certainly, said Bull. Of course he is. Later that night, Jack came and sat next to Bull and asked if he could borrow the rabbit. Bull handed Edward over, and Jack sat with Edward upon his knee. He whispered in Edward's ear. Helen, Jack said, and Jack Jr., and Taffy. She's the baby. Those are my kids' names. They are all in North Carolina. You ever been in North Carolina? It's a pretty state. That's where they are. Helen, Jack Jr., Taffy. You remember their names, okay, Malone? After this, wherever Bull and Lucy and Edward went, some tramp would take Edward aside and whisper the names of his children in Edward's ear. Betty, Ted, Nancy, William, Jimmy, Eileen, Skipper, Faith. Edward knew what it was like to say over and over again the names of those who had left behind. He knew what it was like to miss somebody, and so he listened. And in his listening, his heart opened wide, and then wider still. The rabbit stayed lost with Lucy and Bull for a long time. Almost 7 years passed. And in that time, Edward became an excellent tramp. Happy to be on the road, restless when he was still. The sound of the wheels on train tracks became a music that soothed him. He could have ridden the rails forever. But one night, in a railroad yard in Memphis, as Bull and Lucy slept in an empty freight car and Edward kept watch, trouble arrived. A man entered the freight car and shone a flashlight in Bull's face and then kicked him awake. "Ya bum," he said, "you dirty bum. I'm so sick of you guys sleeping everywhere. This ain't no motel." Bull sat up slowly. Lucy started to bark. Be quiet," said the man, and he delivered a swift kick to Lucy's side that made her yelp in surprise. All his life, Edward had known what he was, a rabbit made of china, a rabbit with bendable arms and legs and ears. He was bendable, though only if he was in the hands of another. He could not move himself, and he had never regretted that more deeply than he did that night when he and Bull and Lucy were discovered in an empty rail car. Edward wanted to be able to defend Lucy, but he could do nothing. He could only lie there and wait. "Say something," the man said to Bull. Bull put up his hands in the air. He said, "We are lost." "Lost, huh? You bet you're lost." Then the man said, "What's this?" And he shone a light on Edward. "That's Malone," said Bull. "What?" said the man. He poked at Edward with the toe of his boot. "Things are out of control. Things are out of hand. Not on my watch. No, sir, not when I'm in charge." The train suddenly lurched into motion. "No, sir," said the man again. He looked down at Edward. "No free rides for rabbits." He turned and flung open the door of the rail car, and then he turned back, and with one swift kick, he sent Edward sailing out into the darkness. The rabbit flew through the late spring air. From far behind, he heard Lucy's anguished howl. "Ahoo! Ahoo!" she cried. Edward landed with a most alarming thump, and then he tumbled and tumbled and tumbled down a long, dirty hill. When he finally stopped moving, he was on his back, staring up at the night sky. The world was silent. He could not hear Lucy. He could not hear the train. Edward looked up at the stars. He started to say the names of the constellations, but then he stopped. "Bull," his heart said. "Lucy." How many times, Edward wondered, would he have to leave without getting the chance to say goodbye? A lone cricket started up a song. Edward listened. Something deep inside him ached, and he wished that he could cry. So I'm very sorry to have to leave you on that very sad note. But once again, Edward has changed his location. So he has now left Bull and Lucy, not on purpose, but now he's waiting for his next part of his journey. So there he is, waiting in the grass, just laying there, looking up at the stars, feeling sad. And if I were him, I'd probably be feeling very sad too right now. So I'm wondering how you're liking the story so far. If you're noticing the changes that are coming through Edward. And I'll start losing track by this point. We're about halfway through the book. Going through pretty fast, though. We'll be finished by the end of the week. And so he's been away from Abilene for a very long time. And this last, with Bull and Lucy, he was with Bull and Lucy even longer than he ever was with Abilene. With Abilene, he was only with her for 4 years. And here with Bull and Lucy, he was on the road for 7. So that's quite a bit of time. So, and we know that he spent almost a year at the bottom of the ocean. And he spent about half a year in the dump. So that's at least probably about 12 years so far. So time's going by. 12 years since Abilene. So he spent 4 years. The story so far started when Abilene had first gotten Edward. So 4 years with Abilene, plus almost a year at the bottom of the ocean. Then I don't remember how many years. They said a long time with Lawrence and Nellie. So I don't actually remember. I have to go back and check. But there was time there, and then he spent a half a year in the dump, so that would be 4, 5.5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yeah, more than 12 years since the start of the story. All right, kids, that's it for today. I will add this segment up, and then I'm going to record another one for you guys for tomorrow. So I will see you later. Have a wonderful day. Bye.